Are these
He's a bully and he's a bitch.
He's a punk. He's a dog. He's a pig.
And he can suck my
He's a con, a bullshit artist, a mutt.
I'll meet him in a hotel room any day of the week and give him a Louisville Slugger.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
Kiss my mother.
Which side of the aisle is really spewing hateful rhetoric?
Pointing what appears to be a water gun at the image of President Donald Trump projected on a whiteboard, art teacher Pale Modi has now been seen by countless viewers.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Weekdays from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, The J.J. McCartney Show, exposing the truth, exposing the lies, exposing the deep state.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage.
How much longer can America survive this kind of hatred?
Video depicting comedian Kathy Griffin holding the bloody, decapitated head of President Trump are no joking matter for the Secret Service.
The rhetoric that has inspired the violence has come from the mainstream of the Democratic Party.
They're involved in the coup, an active attempt to start a bloody civil war.
I want people to imagine an FBI director that has the stones to investigate the deep state. Imagine a justice system that has the integrity to prosecute corrupt government officials. They have refused to apply the 14th Amendment and give conservatives equal protection under the law. What we've seen here has been the gradual takeover of the government by corporatism, by globalism. They have wrested control of our government away from the citizenry and put it in the hands of a few special interests. And these special interests are as evil as the day is long.
We finally do have a president who has the integrity to do this. We finally do have a DOJ who has the integrity to do this. We know that we have people around the president who not only have the integrity, but have the information and the contacts to get everything done you just said. And you say, well, why aren't they doing it? Everything you're seeing on the news, that's what it's about. That's what this investigation's about. That's what calls of impeachment are about. That's what the globalist attack against Trump is about. That's what the hearings are about. That's what the allegations of Russian spying are about. It's about keeping them off point, keeping them off the agenda, keeping them off task. A lot of what you're watching happening right now, and the misdirection and the complete trying to keep Trump off target goes to that birth certificate. The worst crime in American history was perpetrated against America under the regime of Barack Obama. The media is complicit. Congress is complicit. Federal law enforcement apparently has been complicit. We've got a CIA whistleblower, Dennis Montgomery, whose attorney, Larry Klayman, put it all over the internet the other day that he has said that all of this spying that's been going on American people, that it resulted in manipulation and collusion with judges, Supreme Court justices, congressmen, etc., that James Comey was involved in it, that he was at the top of it. All of this stuff you're seeing about Donald Trump's with the Russians, Donald Trump needs to be impeached, Donald Trump, this is a smokescreen to keep our eyes off of what really happened and what's really going on. And America had better wake up to this, JJ.
Your federal government, your federal law enforcement agencies, our federal intelligence agencies, your federal government in toto has been compromised. The fact that Donald Trump has arrived and said, I'm not going to go along with the status quo anymore, is the cause for alarm for these people on the left. And ultimately, Carl, is it possible that yesterday was simply the first shot fired in an impending civil war between two irreconcilable ideologies?
I don't want our children and grandchildren to see or to participate or to fall victim to such a thing. I don't want our nation to go through such a thing. I don't know that we could survive that. Like Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, when he said, now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any other nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. I mean, God's people, we need to pray. We need to not be afraid to speak truth.
Weekdays from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, The J.J. McCartney Show. Exposing the truth, exposing the lies, exposing the deep state. The following is a Nightside Radio Studios production.
From the wind-powered Nightside Radio Studios,
tear down this wall.
This is the J.J. McCartney Show.
It's this man. It's the compassion. It's the dignity. It's the wisdom. It's the horse sense of the guy.
Did you know that 65% of the people murdered in the last 10 years were killed by handguns?
Would it make you feel any better, little girl, if they was pushed out of windows?
The American people have seen the truth, and they can see through your lies. There's coming a day when publications such as yours turn into nothing more than flea market advertising. They'll be handing it out for free in grocery store parking lots under everybody's windshield wiper. Yeah, that's the future for the Washington Post and the New York Times and every other liberal publication in this country. We are not going to tolerate your bull anymore. None of it. The American people are fed up. I thought we made that clear on November 8th, but apparently you people in the media just don't get it. A new chapter in American history begins now.
It is my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the President-elect of the United States of America.
Donald Trump is the person to make America great again.
We are a team.
They said it couldn't be done.
Together we will lead our party back to the White House.
He said it must be done.
Beginning on January 20th, we cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore. The most important difference between our plan and that of our opponent is that our plan will put America first.
Here's J.J. McCartney.
Well, thank you, Marcus, and welcome, everybody. It's Tuesday, the 20th day of February, and we have Dr. Mark Davis in the house. We're going to talk with Dr. Mark about all the latest breaking news and some more heat being applied by Robert Mueller. We'll tell you about that. Plus, we got all kinds of news to share with you today, folks. It's going to be a busy one. The Tuesday broadcast with Dr. Mark Davis starts next. All right, welcome, everybody. Greetings. Welcome to what is a very, very frigid Tuesday here in the high plains of Nebraska, where I woke up this morning, Dr. Mark Davis, and it was 1 degree. And we had about 4 inches of snow that fell yesterday morning through last night. And now they're telling us the high today will be in the teens. And then we're going to get more snow on Thursday. I'm getting sick and tired of this, Dr. Mark.
We've had that kind of weather in the last few weeks. Today, though, is a very odd day. We have over 70 degrees outside my window here, and a clear day tomorrow. It's going to rain a little bit, but I agree with you for having that little bit of snow out there.
Now,
here's the get a lot. I know you get a lot of snow out there for sure.
Here's the fact that they said that the nation's capital was nearing 80 degrees today, and I was thinking to myself, well, that means that because I drive a gas guzzler, I'm killing the polar bears, and it's not like polar bears do anything for the environment.
Yeah. Well, I had my family had a place on the ocean here in New Jersey. It'll stay next door to us, and we ceased to see the polar bears sort of rolling by there. Climate change is definitely. There was definitely climate change. There's no doubt about it.
Well,
But on a lighter note, I can assure the people who are listening, the millions and millions of people listening, that the polar ice caps are intact on both ends of the world, that the poles have not reversed polarity, for sure, and that the sun will rise tomorrow, whether we like it or not. The sun will be there, and climate change is inevitable.
Here's what I think.
But global warming, it's not there. So.
Here's what I think. We should send Al Gore and any number of his political cohorts that keep trying to sell us this man-made climate change. And we should send them down to Antarctica and just leave them there with maybe just a regular winter coat and perhaps a pair of gloves. And then let them spend 1 year down there and then tell us how things are getting so much warmer.
Well, Al Gore is the type of person that leaves a very large carbon footprint with his mansions in the multiples and the private jets and the limousines and the excess use of energy. I think Al Gore should go hide somewhere.
Well, not only that, but the guy, he eats a lot. I mean, it's obvious Al Gore eats a lot. He really does.
Yes,
and so, he is expelling more methane than the average human, even without his jets and his limousines and his mansions and all that. So shouldn't he have to pay more than we do?
Yeah,
if you figure it all out. Now, here's
people that use excessive amount of carbon or leave large carbon footprints should be paying more. So it's basically the wealthy, and they should be paying their fair share, which they're not. And they should be taxed excessively for doing that.
I'm all for soaking the rich. I'm just kidding.
Let's soak them.
I'm just kidding. No, I you know what? Rich people in America have been they have been demonized for far too long, and never have they been officially lauded. They have never been officially lauded and recognized by the liberal press for all the jobs that they've created, all the wealth that they've created, and how you look at somebody like just look at a startup company that exploded, and that was Google. I mean, Google today, by the way, they're being mentioned a lot in the courts, not only of the United States but the world, for antitrust violations and such. But when you grow a company from nothing in 1998 to where it is today, I mean, this is the power of American ingenuity. It really is. And you know what? Google does a lot of things that piss me off, no doubt about it. But you cannot fault them for creating the jobs that they've created. I think they have something like in the neighborhood of 80,000 employees right now. And
I wouldn't be surprised.
And then look at all the tech offshoots that develop around search engines like Google. I mean, there are people writing software every day, and for them, if they do it right, they have the potential to make some big bucks themselves. And none of that was possible before Microsoft, before Google, before the proliferation of personal computers and all of the things that have come from that, from Apple and Microsoft and all of the other, Dell. I mean, lots and lots of people work because of ingenuity, American ingenuity. And I say, why punish people that create those kinds of jobs? I mean, to me...
No, not at all. But you mentioned monopoly. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say the government should be cooperating with these companies, helping them to grow and expand. And instead, what you had was an era under Barack Obama where he singled these people out to make them the big evil monster hiding under everybody's bed. He really did. He tried to punish them, punitive taxation. And, I mean, when you cut 35% right off the top of every dollar that comes into a corporation, that is a job-killing policy. No doubt about it. Okay, you were going to say about monopolies.
Monopolies early in the 20th century were a big deal, and they were broken up under antitrust laws. We do have some monopolies right now. They tried to break up Microsoft unsuccessfly back in the 80s and 90s.
The very first monopoly in the United States that was in the 19th century, the late 1800s, and it was Standard Oil. Standard Oil had gotten so big, of course, the Rockefellers owned it, and it had gotten so big, and what they did was they made sure that they delivered, and mostly kerosene at the time, to the masses. And at a time when the country, before Standard Oil, the country relied 99% on whale fat to light their homes at night. And when Standard Oil came along and provided kerosene, whale fat at that time, whale fat was about $3 a gallon. And Standard Oil got into the business, mass refining, made a lot of technological advances in the refinement process, and they brought the price of kerosene down to 8 cents a gallon versus 3. And you have no idea how many jobs were created because of that. But there were other oil companies that could not compete with the size of Standard Oil. They could not produce a gallon of kerosene for anywhere close to 8 cents. And that's when the government stuck its nose in and said, what's going on here? And recognized that at some point in time, a large company can become a bully just because they are as efficient and big as they are. And at that point, there was a lot of conversation about antitrust and how to keep big companies from squishing their competition in a way that they deemed to be unfair.
That was in 1911. It was Standard Oil in New Jersey versus the United States. Of course, it was broken up at that time. There were also monopolies by train. The trains that crisscross the country and interstate. Those were monopolies, too. They were broken up. There was monopolies for steel. Those were broken up as well. I think it was under Andrew Carnegie at that time. And it goes on and on.
Yeah, let's not forget AT&T. AT&T was... That
was under Carter. Carter initiated it. And I don't know if that was the best thing to do, but again, that's where Verizon originated from, the roots of AT&T.
You know,
I was a kid. I worked for them. I worked for them in New York.
Before the breakup of AT&T, though, they really did have a monopoly, and their monopoly was on long distance. And, long distance was muy expensive throughout the...
Well, there was a reason for that. But there was a reason for that. It was all done by manual. In other words, if a company wanted to call, let's say, something in California, it had to be manually done. It was not. There was no automatic exchanges at the time.
Oh, believe
that was until the 1970s.
I know.
That was. I worked with them. I was working with them. I had a summer job in New York City, and I did work there, and I watched what they did. They had a very strong union as well, and they paid this young fellow about $100 a week, and we would move lines around. I was the old man on the totem, but that's what I watched.
I have a ridiculously cute story to tell you now. In the year 1969, my aunt in Arkansas was getting married, and we had lived in Alaska for 7 or 8 years by that point, and we had none of us kids knew our aunt, except when my brothers and sisters were very young. And so we decided we were going to travel from Alaska via the Alcan in a 1967 GMC, actually no, it's a 68 GMC pickup truck with a camper on it. Mom, Dad, and 4 kids. We traversed nearly 5,000 miles to Arkansas from Alaska, and went down for the wedding. And while we were down there, of course, we met relatives that we'd never met before. I met my my grandma and my grandpa, who were divorced, by the way. And, it was the first time I'd ever met any of my relatives. And so I was blown away. I really was. These are people that know me. They're my kin, And up in Alaska, we were like, it was as though we had been living in exile or something. But we made the trip down there, made the trip back up to Alaska, and lo and behold, I got sick one day. My brothers and sister were in school, as was I. I got sick and I had to go home. And so I went home, but my mom couldn't stay with me because she had to go back to work. So she had picked me up from school, dropped me off at the house. My mom and my dad were both working day shifts at the time. And they said, you're going to have to stay here by yourself with the dogs. Just keep the door locked. And when we get home, we'll make supper and everything will be fine. Okay, I'm 7 years old. And I'm home alone in the middle of the day with nobody to talk to. And I didn't think that was quite fair, quite honestly. And so I picked up the phone and I dialed 0 to get the operator. The operator picks up, and I said, I want to call my grandpa. And she says, well, who's your grandpa? And I told her his name, and I told her that he lived in Walnut Ridge, Arkansas. Well, I can hear her talking with some of the other operators on duty there, and they found his listing. They had to call, several exchanges to find him and track him down. And they put the call through. And my grandpa answered the phone, and we talked for probably 10, 11 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
And then we hung up. And I was sitting, I was sitting there at the house, but I was satisfied because I had actually talked to my grandpa,
Yeah.
And my mom and dad get home. And they say, so what did you do while we were gone? And I said, I called Grandpa and talked to him for a little bit. They didn't believe me. They didn't believe that this 7-year-old could figure out how to place a long-distance call, from Alaska to Arkansas. They would not believe me. And so finally, I said, no, I'm telling you the truth. I talked to Grandpa, So finally, my dad picks up the phone, and he dials the operator. And he says, did somebody take a call from a little boy that was trying to call his grandfather? And the operator says, yes, let me get so-and-so on the line, the operator. So he talked to the operator, and she said, Mr. Jones, please, don't, if it's about the money, we here at the office said we would all chip in to pay for the phone call. And my dad is still in disbelief at this point. And so he and my mother place a call to my grandfather just to make sure that I was, telling the truth. And the first thing he says after they said, hey, did you hear from JJ today? And the first words out of his mouth were, now don't you beat that boy. Because the phone call in 1969 for 11 minutes of long distance came to about $30. I mean, it was expensive.
Right.
But this is something that young people today take so much for granted. The technology we have today, and how they don't understand how that was after the moon landing, and we still had to do everything manually to place a long distance call. And it's amazing, Dr. Mark, that after all these years have gone by, now any phones, any cell phone you get, they say it's unlimited minutes and all this stuff. And it's like people, it's like people that waste drinking water. They just don't realize how much value it has to their life.
Do you know who's doing research on drinking water? You never believe it. Bill Gates. He's poured millions of dollars into clean drinking water for people around the world.
I know he has.
Clean drinking water. This is the kind of person he is. And he demonstrated it on TV. I was watching. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. And they couldn't tell which was the drinking water and which was the water that he was creating.
Right.
That's pretty interesting. And the water that he was creating was from sewage.
Fetid water. And
fetid water. Exactly right. And it was very interesting to see it and to hear a man like this who's put billions into vaccines and interconnecting people on the computers. A real great guy.
I think that there are some things about Bill Gates that give me the creeps.
But let me put the point. When they tried to break his company up as a monopoly, what they did was they brought him into Congress. And they brought him into court, and they tried to break him down some way. He wouldn't break. He's highly intelligent. And what he said was something very basic. He said, all we do is put a product in a box and sell it. That we make a better product than the next guy, that's just too bad for the other guy. Then make a better product than us, and you'll become super powerful like we are. I'm just paraphrasing, but that's essentially what he said. I didn't see where the monopoly was. There were plenty of computer-based programs out there.
Well, here's the thing.
Have to buy Windows 10.
Here's the thing about Microsoft, and a lot of people don't know this because it happened rather, quietly. In 2002, Bill Gates and Microsoft sat down and they signed a consent decree curbing some of their business practices. And he saved Microsoft, both sides in the argument. Neither one of them were allowed to really stand up and declare victory. But the fact that Microsoft still exists in the way that it does today is, I think, was a huge victory for Bill Gates. And the whole thing. I mean, consent decrees are basically a way to make cases like this just go away. Because you know how much money our government spent trying to prosecute Microsoft for antitrust violations? Millions and millions of dollars.
And you know how much money they take in taxes from Microsoft? Billions and billions of dollars a year. So it made up for it. So basically, Microsoft paid for its own prosecution in that sense. And
just nuts.
The dogs are still on his tail right now.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Bill Gates, I mean, he is a philanthropist. You can't take that away from him. And I think somewhere deep down in his heart, he means well. But some of the things that he has embraced in terms of political viewpoints, world population, things like this. I mean, I wonder what he would say if somebody showed him the text on the Georgia Guidestones. I wonder how he would feel about it. The idea that there's too many people in the world today, and that the Earth can't sustain 7 billion people. And I really think that sadly some people, they reach a certain level wealth-wise and stature-wise, and they begin to believe that makes them qualified to basically dictate how other people might live. And I think it's but Bill Gates, there's no doubt about it. He was instrumental in the development of the software that would allow people to be more productive using regular, IBM type personal computers. Before Windows 3.11, it was you had to do a lot of things that, I mean, you had to know a certain amount to really effectively use a computer, especially for interconnecting on what was then mainly university bulletin boards and things like this. And when you look at how far developed the internet is today, one of the major reasons for it is because of Microsoft and the products they developed that, while they seem expensive to some, they made people much more productive in the workplace, as well as much more able to use computers in their homes. And I don't think that we would have nearly as many people using computers today were it not for Microsoft. I really think that, when they developed Microsoft, it was a shot across the bow to Apple. And it was through that competitive process that most of the really great software packages were developed. And people take those for granted, too. They really do.
Apple and Microsoft came into being around the same time. So it was that competitive edge. But Microsoft got the IBM contract, the operating system, which is where it made its major money. Speaking of the Guidestones, the Georgia Guidestones, they want to maintain the population under 500 million.
Yep.
We're far from that. And if you look at Paul Ehrlich's early works called The Population Bomb, he says we cannot maintain a 3 or 4 billion. Well, he's wrong. There's plenty of resource. It's just it's maldistributed.
Yes, it is. And the thing is...
You remember the mathematician Malthus say how we have to bring more food into the world to feed a hungry population because it's geometrically increasing.
One of the reasons, though, that hasn't happened is because you have certain entities, corporate entities that exist that for whatever reason, and it boggles my mind, for whatever reason, the political powers that be, the politics in specifically the continent of Africa, which is, and there's certain parts of Asia that are far underdeveloped as well. But what boggles my mind is why anybody would think that it would be a good idea not to help these nations develop agriculture and be able to be self-sustaining. Instead, they sit back and wait for Russia or the United States to send them bushels of wheat and refined products and all these other things. When, you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And this is, I've never understood why agriculture has not been more developed in these. You cannot tell me that the suffering nations in Africa don't have the natural resources to develop agriculture. There's no doubt in my mind they do.
Yeah.
And if they're that backwards, then it can be frustrating. But when we send help, it gets intercepted by whoever has the advantage on the ground militarily at the time, and it never seems to get where it needs to go. And I think that if Monsanto and other companies like that would get behind a push to help these nations get developed, with absolutely no strings attached, I think that we could wipe out starvation on the planet very quickly.
Yeah, well, genetically modified food per field, per acre, produces a lot more than its competitive part. So that's the way it is. But if we teach people how to utilize the land properly, they can get a lot more food out of it, and how to prepare the land, that kind of thing. That's Lao Tzu. Remember Lao Tzu? If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a day.
Yes.
That goes back to 4th century BC. That's a long time ago.
Wow. Yeah. And you were there.
I was there. People don't know I'm immortal. I don't talk about these things because
be careful.
My wife gets pissed at me.
Be careful.
See, they don't want people to know our real age. You know how women are.
Yeah, I know. I understand. Well, the honest to God truth, though, folks, there is so much that we could be doing. But without the cooperation of, the political powers that exist in places that are, literally you have people starving, you've got, civil wars going on, and, I'm just really shocked that in this 21st century that this is still one of the top things that is one of the biggest problems in the world. And it really, I just shake my head when I think about it because we could be doing so much more. Now, Dr. Mark, we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about what Robert Mueller has been up to and get your impression on where that whole thing is going. We'll come back with more with Dr. Mark Davis on the Tuesday edition of the J.J. McCartney Show. We'll be right back.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, everybody. J.J. McCartney back here for our good friends at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Folks, there's one thing that there never seems to be a shortage of in this world, and that is uncertainty, unrest. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Natural disasters, economic downturns, whatever it is, you can be prepared by going to MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. They have got everything you need, from ProPure gravity-fed water filtration systems to Kimberly stoves to these composting toilets. Ladies and gentlemen, at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com, you can prepare for anything. Food storage? No problem. Advice? No problem. Call our good friend Sue at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Find out what's there for you. Great prices, great advice, and guess what, folks? You'll find it all at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
This vast right-wing conspiracy.
I never told anybody to lie.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
Not a single time. Never. These allegations are false.
This vast right-wing conspiracy.
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
The Clintons took $2 million from me and hid it.
Now, what we're looking at here is the largest election law fraud in the history of the United States.
Allegations of lying about the cost of a fundraiser put together on her behalf.
This vast right-wing conspiracy.
Whatever it is you're doing, is it okay that I thank you?
You know what? We're having a good time trying to help out.
This sounds like it's going to be a great event. I'm glad you were all together so that I could tell you how much this means to me.
This vast right-wing conspiracy.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, parents of children with asthma, here's the Breathe Easies with another one of your favorite hits.
Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke in the house. Don't smoke around the kids in the house. Don't smoke in the car. Don't smoke in the house. Don't break my heart with your secondhand smoke in the kids. It can trigger the asthma.
Preventing asthma attacks can be as simple as making your home and car smoke-free zones. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org. Up next, well, what do you know? The Breathe Easies with another hit song, Vacuum Up the Floor.
Vacuum up the floor. Vacuum up the floor. Yeah! Vacuum up the floor. The asthma trigger is no more. You gotta vacuum up the furniture and vacuum in the cracks because the dander and the dust can give kids asthma attacks.
Simple steps can help your kids breathe easier. Vacuum up the floor to keep your house free of dust, dander, and dust mites. For more Breathe Easy tips to help stop asthma attacks, go to noattacks.org. Brought to you by the EPA and the Ad Council.
All right, we are back on the Tuesday edition of the J.J. McCartney Show. Oh, by the way, no IQ Al-Rassouli tomorrow. IQ is on assignment, and he will return not next week, but the week after that. So we will make do without IQ tomorrow, but we have Dr. Mark Davis with us right now, and we have got more stuff happening in the nation's capital. Robert Mueller has made his move on ex-Skadden lawyer, putting heat on Manafort and Gates. Now, what does that mean? U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller intensified legal pressure on former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and his deputy, Rick Gates, by filing a false statements case against a lawyer who did Ukraine-related work with the two men. Well, here's the thing. That was in the year 2012. Dr. Mark Davis, why do we need to dredge this up?
We don't. This is what we used to call smoke and mirrors. It's a diversionary tactic. The actual target is Donald Trump, not for collusion, but for obstruction, as well as the 13 Russian nationals and 3 companies that were indicted. Those also were just fluff, if you will. Trump is the actual target, and they're going after him. They're trying to go around him first to make it look like, no, Trump's not involved. They will find some way, somehow, to get at Trump. And why? Comey was a friend of Mueller. Remember, Mueller was in there from 2003 to 2013, and Comey took over.
Right.
And they're good buddies. And they're not going to let this go.
Well, they're going to have to, at some point in time, they're going to have to let this go because, first of all, what happened in 2012 that had absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump, the cost of this ridiculous witch hunt to the United States taxpayer does not justify itself when you look at how, this has absolutely nothing to do with the Trump campaign. We already know from the 13 indictments passed down last week that, Mueller cannot find a pathway to attach anything that has been brought up thus far to the Trump campaign or Donald Trump himself. And the fact
that they're trying to go through his children, and they are trying to do that. They're looking at Trump's children's real estate holdings, their business interests across the Great Pond, if you will. So they are doing that, and they will find the path to find not a collusion but obstruction. I think they will. I think they're trying for something. And Mueller's not going to, like I said, he's not going to let this go. The government has endless money, and they will spend it somehow, some way, especially the Democrats pushing this. And you have to remember another point. It's the Republicans that started the special counsel. It wasn't the Democrats, even though they wanted it.
Well, but when you talk about...
It was Sessions recusing him. It was Sessions recusing himself.
That was the biggest boneheaded move I've ever seen. Really was.
Correct. Nevertheless, that's why Trump was so pissed at him, and I don't blame Trump for being pissed at him. And this is still hanging over his head well after a year into his term as president of the United States, for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, you know, the thing that bothers me about this whole thing is that, you know, Jim Comey, if anybody was guilty of politicizing the FBI, it was Jim Comey. And the manner with which he insulated Hillary Clinton from prosecution, and the way that he has tried to use every trick in the book to implicate Trump. And, you know, this, you know, there's no doubt in my mind that James Comey has hated Donald Trump for a long time. There is no doubt in my mind that he loathed and detested Donald Trump well before Donald Trump even declared he was running for president. This is a personal vendetta. And when Jim Comey was fired, and by the way, he should have been fired from day one, but when he was fired, and it is the legal prerogative of any president to fire any member of the cabinet any damn time he wants, does not have to explain himself, doesn't have to give a reason. You know, I mean, very simple explanation. I felt it was time for a change. That would be as much explanation as he would need.
That's not how they're viewing it. What they've done is they're saying that no, the president doesn't have these rights. There are methodologies and protocols to follow, which Donald Trump didn't do. Basically, he did. He got rid of Comey because he felt he was not up to the job. And I don't blame him. But they brought another guy in who's not up to the job either. In the form of I mean, they could bring in Pam Bondi, the Attorney General from Florida, as an example, would be a lot better.
Yeah.
She's definitely, she'd go after the bad guys for sure.
Either that or when Trey Gowdy leaves the House of Representatives, he might very well be a candidate for Attorney General if, I don't know if he would take the job, but if he did, can you imagine how that would shake things up at the Justice Department? But there's one thing.
I think he's at it.
There's one thing I think has been demonstrated to be fact, and that is that the Obama administration politicized and weaponized the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Justice Department itself, the IRS. The Obama administration is guilty of numerous high crimes and misdemeanors of this type that would get any president impeached. The only reason that Barack Obama wasn't impeached is because of the pigmentation of Barack Obama. That's it.
That's right.
That is absolutely it. And, you know, I'd love to hear somebody argue that point. I honestly think I'd mop the floor with anybody that disagrees. The toll-free telephone number for Dr. Mark Davis and myself is 855-853-5227. Those of you listening at Red State Talk Radio or on Roku, we're glad to have you with us today. Also, those listening on Amazon through Amazon Echo, it's great to have you with us. And on YouTube at jjmccartney.com as well. You know, Dr. Mark, at the end of the day, the Mueller investigation, I think, is going to be just as demonized as the Ken Starr investigation was by those on the left. And I think that, you know, it ironically may be one of the few individuals that understands what Donald Trump is going through right now is Bill and Hillary Clinton. Isn't that ironic?
Yeah, sure. It's definitely ironic. This is a trail that leads way back. It's not with Donald Trump. Donald Trump is just a key figure in history who's just happened to be in the White House at the right time for the rest of us. I definitely agree with you.
Now, Dr. Mark, we were talking about developing agriculture in third world nations, but here's something else that bothered me when I saw it in the news headlines today. A Florida city has imposed the death penalty on vegetable gardens. Now, we've got a Mr. and Mrs. here, Hermine Ricketts and husband Tom Carroll. All they want to do is raise a few vegetables for their dinner table, just as they've done for nearly 2 decades. Well, their city and now the courts of Florida have said no. So they will have to await the outcome of a bill that would restore the right to cultivate tomatoes, carrots, or lettuce, defeated by Institute for Justice. They filed suit against the town of Miami Shores Village, Florida, for abruptly amending its zoning ordinance to ban vegetable gardens from residential front yards. Now, fruit, bushes, trees, plastic flamingos, garden gnomes, and many other things are allowed to be displayed, but if you dare to plant vegetables, oh boy, they're going to come at you with both barrels. This is
what happens when you live in small communities. They have certain guidelines, certain covenants, if you will, and they force it. You can't have a certain size flag in your front yard. You can't have any flag in your front yard. You can't even have a symbol of the United States military in your house. It may reflect bad on the community. This is the kind of things that we see going on regularly. Here in Maryland, this happens pretty frequently as well. There's one point which connects into all this. Government forces things down our throat. Here in Maryland, they're considering a bill to force people to buy health insurance, and we got rid of it at the federal level. So they said, well, what the heck, we'll make it at the state level. And then they'll make it so that every small company has to provide health insurance. And if we're a company of 3 or 4 people in this office, we don't have that kind of money. They've already forced sick leave on us. And
now, who's the governor right now in Maryland?
Oh, you God, Hogan.
Oh.
He's a Republican, but he acts like a Democrat all the time.
So he does his best Martin O'Malley impersonation, right?
Yeah, Martin O'Malley raised taxes. He brought the rain tax in here. It's one thing. He raised gasoline taxes. He increased the burden of regulations on small businesses to medium-sized businesses. He lawsuits against Walmart, as an example. I wrote about that in Demons of Democracy. I mean, it goes on and on the list. He brought illegals in. They got preferences in the colleges here over the state residents, legal state residents, on and on and on and on. That's what he legalized gay marriage here in Maryland, and he got the casinos to get going.
Here's
under the former Republican governor, they couldn't do that.
Here's
he proposed it.
And this is a very succinct argument from the Institute for Justice attorney Timothy Snowball. Pointed out that growing food on your own land to provide for your family strikes at the very heart of individualism, independence, and self-sufficiency. And so he's carrying the case for Hermine Ricketts and her husband, Tom Carroll. And I guess what they'll do is they'll either get a law passed or they could appeal. And I don't know how far they can appeal, whether they might get to the state Supreme Court or, maybe a federal appellate court. Who knows? But, there's people out there that would say, well, they don't stand a chance because it's the little guy against the people with deep pockets in local government. And in that case, I mean, it's very, very much the deck is stacked against these people when the Constitution, I think, supports their arguments very well.
Yeah, but people have to understand, first what the government does is they indict you somehow. Somehow, somewhere they sanction you. They pass a law, rule, regulation, or they take it at the extreme to a grand jury. They smear you in the press. These people may be in the spirit of the press. I don't know for a fact, but that's what they do. And they restrict your funds, or you have restricted funds because you're not rich, and you can't fight them.
Yeah.
And they know that because they have unlimited money and you don't. I've been through this, I can tell you. And then they could say anything they want about you. They could say you were growing marijuana there. You have to prove you weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
They said we found a quarter leaf. They dropped it on your. It doesn't matter.
Now, if we're talking about
the government will beat the hell. The government will beat the hell out of you.
If
you know this, you're very.
If they if they were say. It was a homeowners association set of rules or whatever that you have to sign when you buy your property or whatever. I understand that, but there's also the possibility that maybe they were if they were, for example, bringing in truckloads of horse or cow manure, spreading it around their front yard where it was a real nuisance to everybody that lived next to them. Or if they were using, chemicals, fertilizers that were bad for the water system and things like that. I understand why people might raise their eyebrows at it. But if all this is somebody, plowing up, tilling their front yard and planting a couple rows of corn or beans or whatever it is that they're growing, to me, there must be a compelling reason that these people would not be allowed to do this. Because at some point in time, I mean, you own something, but in America, what they've been trying to do for a long time, Dr. Mark, is strip away the fundamentals of land ownership or property ownership. And for a long time now, I mean, we've seen this done with water rights and mineral rights and all these different things. Yeah. But for somebody not to be allowed to grow, lettuce and carrots and things like this in their own yard, I think that there would have to be and the burden of proof should be on the government organizations that are trying to force them out of this. And there should be a high burden of proof required for them to tell somebody you cannot do this on your own property.
You must have read Demons of Democracy. There are several cases in there where there was an insect, a turtle, a bug, a fish, a tree or something that was
a frog,
a frog. It didn't matter, a beetle, and the people went to jail. People actually went to jail for clearing their own land when they claimed the government was a 100-year floodplain. There had been a flood there in 300 years. Nevertheless, there was a 100-year floodplain, and then some of the cases in there are very, very interesting.
Well, in America, I'd say that the courts should always err on the side of freedom. They really should. I mean, they
don't. No, courts are mechanized now. They're politicized.
Yes, they're
genderized.
That's right.
And that's what the courts are doing all over the country. And criminals are being let back on our streets. And we saw what happened down in Florida, for example, how the FBI missed. We should talk about that.
Oh my goodness! Yes, let's
completely screwed up.
Here's the thing:
they could have prevented 100%.
Here's the thing that really shocked me. Deputies had visited the home of Nicholas Cruz 39 times in the past year. This guy was on the radar screen of local law enforcement. He was on the radar screen of the school district. He was on the radar screen of the authorities. We know that the feds got the tip on the YouTube video produced by a gentleman that lives in Mississippi. The actual comment on the video left by Nicholas Cruz said that he was going to become a professional school shooter. And this was in September. And the fact that 39 deputy visits, how in the world could you not have some communication between the sheriff's office and the FBI? Just run a make on the guy, find out if he's ever been on their radar screen, and if the FBI had done their job properly, they could have prevented this, and it never would. It didn't have to happen. The FBI dropped the ball.
All that, the Instagram pictures of him with his hands or arms cut is another alarming piece of evidence. This guy was a nut job from the beginning.
Well, the thing is, though, he wasn't necessarily. I wouldn't want to categorize him as a complete nut job because, first of all, the attack was highly premeditated. Second of all, you have to be sane and rational to plan it out the way that he planned it out. I mean, he set off the fire alarm so that he would have a shooting gallery in the hallways. And the the amount of premeditation that it required to do this, to me, takes the plea of insanity off the table.
Well, he claimed he had demons in his head.
I don't care. I do not care if he had. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
I know. I'm with you.
And this is the thing. The courts need to understand is that at the end of the, and I saw an excellent article a friend of mine posted on Facebook yesterday that put the focus where it needed to be, and the fact that there was only one single person to blame for the Florida school shooting. And this was from Matt Walsh at the Daily Wire. And he laid it out very, very succinctly, very well, indicating that, there's only one person that was responsible for the shooting, and that was Cruz himself. And
but with that said, though, it was too easy for him to get an AR-15. It was too easy for him to get the ammo for that weapon as well. And I'm not blocking people from either one. We should make it a little bit harder, especially if you had, let's say you had to license the ammo, for example, for an AR-15. It's just another layer. Maybe someone would have picked up something at that time period, but no one picked up anything on this. And 19-year-old, what does he need an AR-15 for? Come on, it's just crazy. This is not target practice.
Yeah, I think that what needs
self-defense,
to, obviously, the Second Amendment is alive and well. And I'm all for the Second Amendment. We do have a right to keep and bear arms, and an AR-15 in the hands of somebody that's responsible. I mean, why do people demonize the National Rifle Association when they are the world's largest advocate of gun safety and training? And they are not. Yeah, and the mistaken impression that people on the left have is that every time a big shooting like this happens, that somehow they're happy about it. They're not. This doesn't make advocating gun rights any easier. And the bottom line is they don't want people to go off half-cocked either. I mean, it bothers me that the media latches onto these people that are so radical in their views regarding gun ownership. It wasn't the gun that committed the crime. It wasn't the ammunition that committed the crime. I agree with you,
but you have to have an opposing view in this particular case. We know that's a given, but that's an old argument that people use. The practice that people have just walking in and they can buy the armaments and the ammo and that kind of thing is still out there, and it needs to be tightened up in some manner or format, or this is going to continue and continue. And we don't know who's coming through the door, whether it's a psycho or a non-psycho. Let's put another step in there of review. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying for handguns necessarily, but I'm saying for these automatic weapons, which are causing the majority of these school shootings.
Yeah, I understand that. I have to tell you, I think that if you have to be 21 years old to drink legally, then I think maybe perhaps they need to move the age restriction to 21 as well.
Well, that's not a problem. That's not a problem, though, age. Let's say they do that, but someone 22 can go in and get it. 25 could be a cycle. A 31-year-old. There should be several layers of review for this type of weapon and its ammo.
Now, Dr. Mark,
that would filter out a lot of people. Another
common thread in these mass shootings where they are committed by young people at schools, and that is psychotropic drugs. For far too long, behavioral problems have been treated by doctors who pass out these pills like they are Tic Tacs. We're talking Prozac, we're talking Xanax, we're talking a wide variety of psychotropic drugs. And when you're tinkering with somebody that has behavioral problems to begin with, and you give them medications that the side effects clearly say that these can cause suicidal or homicidal tendencies to come out, they can cause wild mood swings, and I mean they're very unpredictable medications to put into somebody who is perhaps not quite fully developed as a mature human.
Case, though, to protect the 1 million doctors and 2.5 to 3 million nurses and the excellent emergency people really quick, then we'd have a lot more shootings, and we don't.
Yeah, I think, though, that if you look at the common threads, though, I mean, this is something you can't deny. Adam Lanza, James Holmes, and many, many other shooters, including Harrison Klebold, were on psychotropic medications. Just saying. Dr. Mark, thanks for being with us. Got to run. Hour number 2 up next.
California, at least 13 people were arrested as hundreds blocked traffic on 2 major highways, waving Mexican flags and burning a giant effigy of Donald Trump. Police fired rubber bullets, and pepper spray at hundreds of protesters after the crowds took over major intersections.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Homophobia, sexual assault, white supremacy.
In terms of reaching out and being inclusive, he's done that too. And a will to risk to make things better and opportunities to embrace the underserved communities.
White privilege!
Load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Here in New York, as many as 10,000 people surged through the streets and surrounded the barricaded-off Trump Tower where Donald Trump lives.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
We reject the president-elect! Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
I think it speaks to the disenfranchisement of the people that someone like him could be seen as offering anything to the masses.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Little snowflake falling from the sky.
What about gay people? Trump has vowed to protect the LGBT community from a fanatical ideology that represents its biggest threat. Radical Islam.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake, falling, 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 falling.
He is a racist.
Under Obama, more black people are living below the poverty line. The number of African Americans on food stamps has increased 58% under Obama.
On every leading economic issue, on the major economic issues, black Americans have lost ground in every one of those leading categories. So for the last 10 years, it's not been good for black folks.
Is this how the left helps black communities? By making them poorer and more dependent on government. Race relations are at their worst in decades. 8 years of Obama has been devastating for the black community.
He is a sexist. He is a neo-Nazi.
Well, we don't understand why you called in the National Guard.
Falling on my nose.
Not my president. He is a lying ass.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake.
Fake ass.
Little snowflake falling from the sky.
Dumb ass son of a bitch.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Snowflake, snowflake, little snowflake falling, 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 falling.
That's not my president. That's not my president.
Load up, load up, load up, rubber bullets.
Falling in my hand.
Thank you for taking America back 60 years of progress.
Falling on my head.
You just voted in a Nazi fascist.
Falling on my nose.
you gonna do about it? What you gonna do?
Live from the Nightside Radio Studios.
This is the JJ McCartney Show.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago?
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Coming to you from Nebraska by way of Alaska. Here's JJ McCartney.
All right, thank you, Marcus, and welcome back, everybody. It's hour number 2 of the JJ McCartney Show. Thanks to Dr. Mark Davis for being with us in the previous hour. We have got news to cover, and ladies and gentlemen, you talk about delusional nut jobs. Have I got a story for you? Plus, I have questions. Yes, I have questions for any of you out there that have watched any of the Olympic coverage on NBC. It has been, as I understand it, absolutely brutal. NBC's coverage has been described as the worst Olympics coverage ever. There are people out there that are wondering, scratching their heads, why in the world would NBC bring in Katie Couric to co-anchor coverage? I mean, Katie Couric is like poison. She really is. You look at what Katie Couric did to CBS News. I mean, it was a joke. She was a laughing stock. And they brought her back to cover the Olympics. Anyway, we'll get to that later. First, ladies and gentlemen, George Clooney. George Clooney signaling political move. He and his wife, Amal, are donating $500,000 to March for Our Lives. And they will be there saying, our children's lives depend on it. Now, George Clooney continues his charitable giving. Now $500,000 to the March for Our Lives. He and his wife will make an appearance at the gun control rally. Clooney is an ardent supporter of civil rights in places like Sudan, with the still going Not on Our Watch. They are still giving hundreds of thousands of dollars there to protect the South Sudan. But this may signal a new political move by Clooney by actually going to Washington, D.C. on March 24th. Clooney, thanks to the sale of his Casamigas tequila company for $1 billion, now has the money to put behind causes that he and his wife believe in. So this is a big deal, but not uncommon for an actor who is passionate about the right causes. Now, can you tell, ladies and gentlemen, can you tell where this story comes from? It comes from the website showbiz411.com. So you know what angle they're taking on this. Will George Clooney run for president? Last fall, when he was promoting Suburbicon, Clooney said this: would I like to be the next president? Oh, that sounds like fun. Can I just say that I'd like anybody to be the next president of the United States? Right away, please, he joked. Clooney, by the way, took in an Iraqi refugee last September in Kentucky. The refugee is now a student at the University of Chicago. Clooney said at the time he was on this bus to Mosul, and ISIS shot the two bus drivers and said, anybody who wants to go to college, we will shoot them, says Clooney. He survived and came to America. He got through all the checks, and once he got through those, it was like, listen, we got your back. You want to get an education? You want to move your life forward? This is something that we can do. Here's the mission statement. It says, March for Our Lives is created by, inspired by, and led by students across the country who will no longer risk their lives waiting for someone else to take action to stop the epidemic of mass school shootings that have become all too familiar. In the tragic wake of the 17 lives brutally cut short in Florida, politicians are telling us that now is not the time to talk about guns. March for Our Lives believes the time is now. And then you've got Clooney saying, Amal and I are so inspired by the courage and eloquence of these young men and women from Stoneman Douglas High School. Our family will be there on March 24th to stand side by side with this incredible generation of young people from all over the country. And in the name of our children, Ella and Alexander, we're donating $500,000 to help pay for this groundbreaking event. Our children's lives depend on it. Oh, George. Oh, George, oh, George, oh, George. Seriously, aside from, he was born privileged. George Clooney was born into a family of wealth, coddled by his rich aunt, Rosemary Clooney. George Clooney has never struggled for anything in his life, ever. He bought into this tequila company. That doesn't make him a genius. It really doesn't. They sold it for $1 billion. And my question is this. If you're going to look at school shootings and say we have to do something about this, well, let's take a look for a moment, if we could, at the lives lost every year on America's highways by drunken drivers. And what does it say about the character of George Clooney that he profited to the tune of almost $500 million selling tequila? Where is the clamor? Where is the outcry on somebody that, made a fortune selling alcohol in a nation where alcohol is responsible, by using the same logic as the gunfight, or the alcohol is responsible, I guess, for, many thousands of deaths every year. Drunken drivers kill many more people every year than school shootings do. So don't you have to blame the booze in that case? We're just using the same logic that George Clooney is using. Seriously, you look at all the lives lost to drunk driving every year, and then you get George Clooney up there sounding all magnanimous. Oh, we're going to donate $500,000 in the name of our children because we have to do something. Our lives depend on it. Well, what about the lives of those people killed by drunk drivers every year? Hey, George, you were in the tequila business and you made a big, big sum of money selling that tequila business. My question is, where's your conscience when it comes to this? Some people would say it's apples and oranges, but dead bodies, in slabs at the morgue are dead bodies on slabs at the morgue. So how is that apples and oranges? You sell somebody something that, if they don't use it responsibly, it can cost lives. So, George Clooney, where are you when, the march against drunk drivers takes place? Or do you have to check with your wife for permission before you can give money to any cause? Maybe that's it. Maybe you and Amal can, find some other cause to embrace. But if you're going to demonize people that own guns in the United States, then why don't you go somewhere where there isn't a Second Amendment, George? I mean, you've got the money. You could afford to move anywhere. But see, we got this thing called the Second Amendment, which guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms. And it doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room. Doesn't leave a whole lot of wiggle room for people like you. Now, look, nobody was more brokenhearted, the exception of the immediate families of the victims. I mean, it was a tragedy, no doubt about it, and I was very saddened when I saw it happen. But you cannot blame an inanimate object. An inanimate object is never the cause of a crime. It's a tool in the hands of a person. The person is responsible for what they do with the weapon. Some people say, well, it shouldn't be so easy for people to purchase weapons. Well, or they're saying, well, these assault weapons, they don't belong in the hands of well, according to the Constitution, the whole reason for the Second Amendment is not so that people can go duck hunting. The Second Amendment was brought into existence because the founders wanted to both empower and give the American people responsibility for being able to defend themselves, not only from foreign enemies that come onto American soil, but also to defend themselves from tyranny, including a tyrannical government. Very simple. In order, a well-regulated militia being necessary. I mean, how many of you know this by heart? How many of you know the Second Amendment by heart? Very simple. The Second Amendment to the Constitution is very simple. Very simple for a reason. It is certainly, it was the intention of lawmakers and founders of this nation when they were writing the Bill of Rights to make sure that nobody misunderstood what the Second Amendment consisted of and why it was written the way it was. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. There's some varying language in a few different versions that were written down. One said a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Period. End of sentence. End of amendment. So, how do you misinterpret that? The most dangerous thing in the world is when somebody whose brain is not fully developed oversimplifies situations such as the Florida shooting. They oversimplify it by simply saying that if only that person hadn't been allowed to have a weapon, then this would never have happened. Ladies and gentlemen, throughout human history, evil people have found ways. Evil people have found ways. You look at the shootings, the epidemic of shootings in Chicago when Barack Obama was president. And are you seriously telling me that none of those individuals that committed those shootings in Chicago none of those individuals would have simply gone home for the day and not made trouble if there was a law that said they weren't allowed to have guns? Well, let me tell you something, folks. Most of the shootings that took place in Chicago while Barack Obama was president were people that legally were not allowed to have guns. We're talking convicted felons. How many, seriously, in the justice system in America is built in such a way that recidivism is almost automatic. For these people that have been in the system and they get out, the recidivism rate, especially in Chicago, just up the road from Joliet, the recidivism rate in Chicago, especially among young black men between the ages of 19 and 25. What do you suppose the recidivism rate is? Very high. And those people, very few of which have been caught, but those that have, the vast majority of them, legally speaking, were not allowed to have a gun, but they had one anyway. You telling me that a new law would prevent these people from getting their hands on weapons on the black market or wherever they can find them? All right, toll-free phone lines open, 855-853-5227. That's toll-free in the United States, 855-853-5227. Would love to hear your opinion. And while we're on the subject, I'm going to change subject for a moment. I want to get your impressions of, have you watched any of the Olympic coverage? Is it as bad, as atrocious as I am told it is? Because, folks, we don't have cable TV. We don't get NBC. So we have been spared the monstrosity of the coverage that NBC has done. But I'd like to hear from somebody out there, maybe tell me what they think of the Olympic coverage that they've seen. And again, the toll-free telephone lines are open at 855-853-5227. It's Tuesday, the 20th of February, 2018, and we've got more to come on the J.J. McCartney Show in just a minute.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Hey, everybody. J.J. McCartney back here for our good friends at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Folks, there's one thing that there never seems to be a shortage of in this world, and that is uncertainty, unrest. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. Natural disasters, economic downturns, whatever it is, you can be prepared by going to MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. They have got everything you need, from ProPure gravity-fed water filtration systems to Kimberly stoves to these composting toilets. Ladies and gentlemen, at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com, you can prepare for anything. Food storage, no problem. Advice, no problem. Call our good friend Sue at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com. Find out what's there for you. Great prices, great advice, and guess what, folks? You'll find it all at MountainViewOffGridLiving.com.
Due to the recent revelation, the NSA has been using a secret court order to spy on every single Verizon and AT&T customer. Americans have become outraged and concerned about their rights to privacy. The only way to fight back against our country's excessive wiretapping and data mining is to make it irrelevant. That's why we're launching Operation Everyone Talk Like a Terrorist all the time. If we all openly discuss terrorist plots in each of our phone conversations, then eavesdropping on those phone conversations becomes pointless. It's simple. We just need to work it into our daily vernacular. Instead of saying, I love you, you could describe a terror attack. The larger the scale, the more you love the person.
Hi, Mom. I just got out of school. Can you pick me up?
I'll be there in 15 minutes. I'm gonna use a truck bomb to blow up the Brooklyn Bridge.
I'm mailing anthrax to Piers to Morgan.
And those are just a few examples. You can make up your own. Have fun with it. But it's time for us to stand up and protect our rights. I'm gonna set off a nuke at the MTV Movie Awards.
A promise was made. A promise that hit the beaches of Normandy. A vow that captured Iwo Jima. a contract that weathered Tet, a pledge that stormed the desert in Iraq, an IOU that braved IEDs in Kandahar. A promise was made to America's veterans. DAV fights to keep that promise, so all veterans and their families get the benefits and support they earned. For help, visit DAV.org.
The J.J. McCartney Show.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Hi. I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
Well, before I left my campsite, I was putting out my fire, and out of nowhere, Smokey Bear showed up and hugged me?
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah. He likes it when people correctly put out their campfires. He's pretty big on wildfire prevention. He's just letting you know you did good with a hug. He's a hugger.
I just got a bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update!
All right, I'm going to let you go now. I've got a lot of ranger stuff to do. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. It's the Tuesday edition of the J.J. McCartney Show, and here is that piece from Matt Walsh, a very timely piece from dailywire.com. He says, as we argue over who and what is to blame for the Florida school shooting, it seems we have lost sight of the fact that the one and only person to blame for the shooting is the shooter. From the way we discuss this massacre and every other, you'd think that it was carried out by some kind of robot, compelled by an outside force to go and slaughter 17 innocent people. You'd think he was forced into it by a certain political party or a certain organization or even by the gun he was carrying. You'd think there must be a whole parade of people and things to blame for this horrible act, except the guy who acted. We ask a million questions in the aftermath of the crime. What law could have prevented it? Should guns be outlawed? Which political party can we pin this on? Was the killer a white nationalist? Did he support Trump? Did he hate Trump? So on and so on. But the one question we seem to avoid is the one that matters most. Why would a person choose to do something like this? And even if we do ask the question, we're likely to arrive at a conclusion that absolves the murderer of personal guilt. We're likely to shrug our shoulders and say, well, mental illness. And then we can start clamoring for a national conversation about it. But our national conversation is rather pointless because nobody can explain mental illness or define it. Our best answer is that a mental illness is something in your brain that makes you do extremely bad things. Therefore, anyone who does extremely bad things is mentally ill. The bad thing isn't their fault. It's a symptom of a disease. Well, the shooter's defense team says the poor guy is troubled, and they're exploring the possibility of autism. I don't personally care about his mental troubles or whatever, alleged psychiatric disorder or whatever they can tag on him, and I'm sure they can tag him with several psychological disorders. Here's the only thing we need to know. Did he know what he was doing when he did it, and did he know it was wrong? Well, his defense team stupidly has also said that the shooter is deeply sorry for his actions, and he understands the gravity of what he did. In other words, he's not crazy. He's fully responsible for his behavior, 100%. A crazy man is a man who has no concept of reality and truly does not understand that he isn't supposed to kill people. You know a man like that when you see him. He's sitting on a park bench yelling at himself. He's not hatching a sophisticated assault on his local high school, complete with a pretty smart escape plan. Sure, he's mentally disordered. His mind is not properly ordered. Everyone's mind is disordered. We are a deeply imperfect species with deeply imperfect minds. Flip through the latest edition of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, and you'll find dozens of mental disorders that apply to you. They've got a mental disorder to explain every errant human behavior or desire ever conceived by man. They have completely medicalized evil, diagnosed it, medicated it, cataloged it. Yet even you, with your 20 or 30 mental disorders, would not grab a rifle and shoot up a school. This guy did. Why? Because he made a choice, an evil choice. A choice rooted not in his brain, but in his mind. That is, his soul. It was an act of evil committed by an evil man who had the same motivation as every other evil man in history. He wanted power, fame, revenge. He wanted a thrill. He wanted to punish the world for rejecting him. He wanted to punish God for creating him. He wanted the same things all bad people do. It's really not so mysterious or difficult to understand. He made a choice. And now all of the blame, anger, fury, resentment should fall squarely on his shoulders and his shoulders alone. Now, I understand and I agree 99%. But, Mr. Walsh, I just want to remind you that the FBI had opportunities to do more than just scratch at the surface and find out if there was really a threat. Obviously, there was. Obviously, there was. What people must begin to understand is this. It doesn't matter whether the kid was sane or crazy. What matters is what he did. And that crime should be punished as severely as humanly possible. There seems to be more concern on the part of the media for the mental health of this shooter than for the families of his victims. And for a real teachable moment for those of us who are sane to prevent this type of massacre in the future. So forget those psycho babblers out there who claim the death penalty is not a deterrent for would-be criminals. I will state with great confidence that swift punishment, the kind that is decisive and final, will give people pause. If we have the courage to execute murderers, it will certainly prevent recidivism. And isn't that what is really needed? 855-853-5227. 855-853-5227. Okay, folks. I wrote a piece night before last, and I would like to share it with you. This is it's a personal thing, but I just wanted to share this because it seems to me that what we've found in America You know, most of these shootings that have taken place in a home where the father wasn't present to rear the child. So I want to talk about fathers, and in my life experience, there's one in particular, my dad. And I'd like to introduce you to him. He wasn't a perfect man, born into the hardship and poverty, and parents as mean and dumb as they were fertile. Life wasn't easy. Try being a 3-year-old when the Great Depression bore down on Hicks in the poor side of Jonesboro, Arkansas. He was treated like a punching bag his first 14 years. His major preoccupation was trying to stay out of his dad's sight. And he couldn't find many safe places except for his friends from school, especially a pair of brothers and their family. Times were hard. In 1940, at the age of 14, he left home. He winded his way to California, where a half-brother and his wife lived. He took a job for the Coca-Cola bottling company in Los Angeles. He would ride on the trucks and catch 24-bottle cases, we're talking glass bottles, and stash them in the truck. Hard work for 20 cents an hour. He found a room in a boarding house. He had one pair of socks, one pair of dungarees, and one T-shirt. He would wash his clothes in the sink every night. He quickly figured out that life was not taking him where he needed to be. So, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1942. He lied about his age because he was only 16. By the time he was at sea, the war, World War II, was over. He traveled all over the Pacific with some ordinary and some exotic ports of call. He stayed away from Arkansas until 1951, when he came to see his family and his ailing father. Upon arriving, his father got out of his sickbed, and instead of a welcome for the prodigal son, he reared back and hit my dad in the face. Such were the sensibilities of that branch of the family tree. The bright spot of his trip was a chance meeting with my mother. They fell in love and were married in March of 1951. He was 26, she was 18. That's how it worked in those days. Dad's naval career in peacetime was based in Norfolk, Virginia. Lots of work in the shipyards, and a few more deployments in the Pacific, but far from the war in Korea. By the time Dad was ready to leave the Navy, he had one daughter, and a son was on his way. In late 1960, a second son was born, and an idea was hatched by my dad's brother. Let's just call him Uncle Dub. The idea, let's go to Alaska and homestead. So, with 3 kids under the age of 6, Mom and Dad sold everything, bought an old school bus from a surplus auction. It was an old Norfolk School District school bus. They gutted the thing and built it into a functional, if ragged, camper. Then came the drive north to Alaska. Homesteading 160 acres in Hatcher's Pass, outside a tiny spot in the road called Willow, north of Anchorage, about 60 miles. This was untamed wilderness. They bought an old D8 Caterpillar bulldozer and cleared enough land to build a small 16-foot by 16-foot cabin with a lean-to, an outhouse, a large half-pole barn, and a garden. It was a subsistence lifestyle. The first winter was very harsh. This area of Alaska is in a mountain pass, and winters can easily bring low temperatures in the minus 30s and minus 40s with harsher cold on occasion. That winter, minus 60-degree temperatures happened on numerous occasions. Such a harsh environment was not an ideal place to raise 3 young children. So imagine how hard it would be when they discovered I was on the way. And my mother developed some complications with my pregnancy. They decided to abandon the homestead lifestyle and move to the big city of Anchorage prior to my birth. They found an 8 by 32-foot trailer in the Sunset Trailer Court. I arrived in September of 1962 at Providence Hospital. Dad took a job as a patrolman for the Anchorage Police Department that summer. Dad was the ideal police officer. His temperament was such that men looked up to him as a leader and a seasoned, sensible, level-headed guy with just enough of a sense of humor to earn their respect and their trust and their friendship. Now, Dad remained on the job for several years when the Anchorage Police Department promoted him to sergeant. And he was also a key figure in negotiating a collective bargaining agreement for the Anchorage Police Department, which led to the Teamsters Union coming to Alaska. And that leads to improvements in working conditions, benefits, retirement accounts, and prepared the rapidly growing city of Anchorage to manage that growth in a far more organized fashion. Well, Dad's career as a sergeant was cut short when he suffered a heart attack in 1974. A heavy smoker, Dad's heart and lungs were made worse by hypertension and type 2 diabetes. He had also developed emphysema. And working in the Navy, he likely was exposed to asbestos as well. Ultimately, Dad was forced into medical retirement in 1975. Now, that was a hard reality for a 48-year-old man to take. Mom and Dad both worked for a good portion of the late 60s and early to mid-70s. They had bought a modest house in 1965. And by the time Dad retired, the home had appreciated enough that when they sold the house, they had enough equity to put into the bank that we could look for a place in the warmer climes of Arkansas where Mom and Dad had decided to move. We left Alaska in August of 1975 in a Mini Winnie motorhome. Now, that journey from the only home I had ever known at 13 caused me to tumble into my adolescence, always looking over my shoulder, longing to return to the land of my birth. Once we landed in Arkansas, Mom and Dad decided it would be good for me to see this great nation. So while other kids my age were in the 8th grade, we took that Mini Winnie to roam the West. We headed first to Colorado, where some dear friends of ours had moved recently. We traveled to Estes Park, Colorado, a magically beautiful place high in the Rockies. Our Mini Winnie was surprisingly well equipped. With a generator and a TV antenna, we had a small 7-inch solid-state Zenith black and white TV. This trip was a real transformative trip. A real transformative trip in my relationship with my dad. You see, my dad worked odd hours. Many times he would sleep during the day and work at night. So on this trip, we had, for the first time in my life, spent quantity time that was also quality time together. We got to know each other. He taught me how to play cribbage. He would later regret that. We had a chance to watch the Major League Baseball playoffs live. We'd never seen it before because in Alaska at the time, TV shows were taped and sent to Alaska, and the World Series we would see 2 weeks after the fact. But this time we watched it live together, and I had decided I was a Cincinnati Reds fan by that point. Well, if a father and son were going to bond over baseball playoffs, it is hard to argue that the fall of 1975 was the finest Major League Baseball postseason in the history of the game, especially the 1975 World Series between the Reds and the Boston Red Sox. Names like Johnny Bench, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, George Foster, Dave Concepcion versus Carl Yastrzemski and Carlton Fisk and many more. That World Series was as good as any before or since. We were visiting my aunt and uncle in Bakersfield, California. Game 6. We got to watch on their big color TV. Now, you have probably seen the classic scene. Extra innings. Carlton Fisk hits a high fly ball to left. If it stays fair, it forces Game 7. And Fisk is slowly trotting toward first base, watching the ball sail as he's waving his arms to his right, pleading with the ball to stay fair as it prepares to go high above the big green monster. The ball obliges, and the series goes to a decisive Game 7. Now, Game 7 would fade from our memories, as it was just an ordinary game. But almost 43 years later, people who were old enough to remember can tell you where they were on that October night. Your dad was such a different person to me after we spent that fall in close quarters. He was funny. He was smart. He was present. And I got to see him when he was not consumed by work. We had conversations. We learned to appreciate each other as we got to know one another. Now, being the youngest, I seldom had conversations with Dad when he was working for the police. His job took much out of him physically. Long, dark, and cold nights, most of the time spent sitting behind a desk or sitting behind the wheel of a patrol car. In the bitter, cold winters, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. Dad was between 1 and 2 packs a day. His body was ripe for diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and his diet was equally detrimental. Some people fail to realize how much genetics also plays a role in people's vulnerability to these diseases and conditions. In hindsight, every member of Dad's family except Uncle Dub, who was a boxer and a U.S. Marine, had diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease. Now I, too, have these conditions. My dad never attended college, but he was very smart. He had an incredible mind in terms of understanding how things work. He was also mostly even-tempered, which served him well. And he had a disarming wit. He was polite, fun to know, and could talk someone down from a ledge or from a tense situation better than anybody I ever saw. He may not have been to college. He left school after the 8th grade. But my dad was schooled by the Navy, by the hard times he lived through, by the jobs he held, and by the instincts God gave him. He was a loving father, but wasn't terribly good at telling his family how he felt. He was not much for church, but he believed in God. He was good at talking to people, as I said, talking them down from tense situations, yet he wasn't able to see himself as a man who could have quit smoking, could have taken better care of his body, and could have extended his life by many years had he just had the self-control. But I'm not judging him, as I myself have found it difficult to control my own weaknesses in regard to diet, exercise, and better choices. In truth, America is suffering from such a lack of self-control in epidemic proportions today. But in the end, my dad was a gem of a man. He was kind, and he was bearing invisible scars of a childhood most of us cannot even begin to relate with. He was a disciplinarian with us kids, and he tried hard to prevent us from suffering from making the same mistakes he made in his life. He would have wanted all of us to learn from his faults. By the time I started my career at 15, anytime my voice would come on the radio, he beamed with pride. I will never forget one time we were grocery shopping together at the Piggly Wiggly in Walnut Ridge. When we heard one of my commercials on the radio, they had it playing on their speaker system. He just beamed, and he was telling people up and down the aisles, "Hey, that's my boy." For some stupid reason, I was in a hurry to put childhood behind me, and as such, I skipped the 8th grade and the 12th grade, and then raced my way through college. I graduated from college at 18 years old on May 20th, 1981. 5 days later, after selling all my possessions, I was on a jet from Memphis to Anchorage. I had every intention of coming back home to see Dad and Mom again, but it never happened. I worked from job to job, pegging my way up the ladder of radio, and had responsibilities and very little money. I never did get to come home again and spend time with Mom and Dad at the old house. Dad suffered an aortic aneurysm which burst in October of 1984. I did manage to fly to Memphis and see him in the hospital there, but after several days spent, I had to fly back to Alaska. Dad died on December 16th of 1984 at the age of 58 after his organs began to shut down from gangrene, which had gone unnoticed in his belly. The days that followed, were some of the most difficult of my life. Other personal issues had come up around that same time, and I found myself spending ample amounts of time alone, perplexed and bewildered, as I was jobless, seeking a home and work wherever I could find it. Many times since then, I have found myself thinking of my father, my beloved father, my friend, my hero, and a man that any person would have been proud to know. And now I am the father. Now I am the man whose body seems to be finding ways to slow me down, wear me down, and pay me back for times when I took the quick comforts over the healthier option. But I'm trying. I want to be here for all the things my dad missed. I hope and I pray I can. But whatever may happen, one thing will never surrender. The fact that Homer E. Jones was my father, and that I am proud to be his son. I don't mourn anymore the fact that he never got to meet my wife or my daughter, for I am sure he will be there one sweet day in my Father's house, ready to greet us all with open arms, and all of us will be whole. Homer E. Jones was God's choice to be my dad, and God knew exactly what he was doing. The biggest thing I miss is not being able to pick up the phone and dial that old phone number and hear his voice talking me down from a tense situation, telling me exactly what I needed to hear, and just calming my nerves with his reassuring tones. America could use millions of fathers with that kind of quiet assurance for their own children. Love from a father cannot be replaced by anything else in a child's life. I pray today for the children of the world that they can know the kind of love I knew from my father. It's let me just wrap it up here by saying, you want to fix what's wrong in the world? Too many men who aren't willing to be fathers to their offspring. Yeah, I miss Homer E. Jones. Even 33 plus years later, I feel this void. But I am no longer sad because I know he is healed. He is whole. And he is very much alive. You know, why else? Why else would a man do things that to the outside world look difficult? Simple. Because we know what the right thing to do is. And because whether he is here on earth or he is in heaven with our Heavenly Father, I feel an obligation to honor that man by living honorably and by holding dear the same things that he held dear. And maybe, just maybe, learning from a few of his mistakes. People, life is short. Life is short. If you have children, please be there for them. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It does not matter how many possessions you have amassed. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter what the world sees. What matters is what you know is right, what you know is decent, honorable. What matters is what you do with the life that God gave you. And if there's one thing I know, it's this: there is no higher priority in a father's life than the well-being of his family. There is no higher priority for a father than to raise up his son with all the proverbs in mind. Sometimes it'll be the hardest job in the world. Other times it will be the most rewarding thing that you've ever experienced in your life. Raise them up with love and discipline, but equal parts compassion. Listen to your kids, and they will listen to you. Give them the kind of attention that no substitute ever could. Homer E. Jones, he was a great man. A great man that very few people on the earth got to know. I remember dreaming maybe someday my dad could grow up to run for office and become the president. And I was sure he would fix everything. But no, Homer E. Jones was way too smart to go down that road. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you feel for your father the way I feel for mine. And if you weren't blessed with a father who is present in the home, I can tell you there's another father in heaven that will greet you with open arms. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for the Tuesday edition. No IQ tomorrow. Remember, we're just going to do a straight show tomorrow. It's going to be news and comment on the Wednesday edition. All right, be good to yourselves, and if you possibly can, be good to someone else. And remember, we'll win in the end because there are more of us than there are of them, because God is with us. and because we are all in this thing together. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. See you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.